I also wanted to take a minute here to answer a question that came in. I'm not sure if this was already answered. The question basically was, can we use Infopath to build applications instead of ASP.NET? I just wanted to point out, like in the demo I showed very good custom code. This building Infopath applications basically reduces your time that is required for development, and if required, there is an option of writing the same C# or Visual Basic code that you would write in an ASP.NET application. So to answer that question at a very high level, Infopath gives you a lot of features that are already built in and on the SharePoint platform as well, which reduces your development time as opposed to the conventional development approach. And I would like to hand it over to Anand, who is going to show you how the application looks like.
Indeed. Let's go ahead and jump right into the planning and budgeting solution. So you should be able to see a pretty standard SharePoint project team site. If you see some scroll bars that are not on the screen that I'm specifically controlling, then you can go ahead and hit F5 to get into full screen mode. So what you can see here is the stepping stone for the planning and budgeting solution. It's a basic SharePoint team site. The planning and budgeting as a process is most often, or more often than not, a team activity. And it made sense to take advantage of the collaborative capabilities of SharePoint to host the application within a team project site. You can see there's libraries to hold documents, subsites to support individual needs for organization. So we took not only the forms and workflow part of the solution, but combined it with some of the enterprise content management principles and some of our upfront SharePoint planning, deployment, governance to really make it an all-encompassing solution for the full experience. So if we're looking through these links, you see there's the application itself, which launches the main planning and budgeting solution and its corresponding modules. You have a set of administration forms in an effort to really empower the information worker and the business worker. The administration of the planning and budgeting solution is managed in the same interface of the app itself. So, for example, I can manage my chart of accounts and alter, descriptions of GL codes here. I can manage business rules and job codes here. I can manage user access and user security, not just from a user can or cannot access the system, but what specific modules a user can access. So it's setting up role-based security within the application itself. And really, I can do all these things as a member of the business team without relying on IT to do it for me, but I'm not violating any of IT's policies or standards. So it really empowers the business user. So let's go ahead and launch the application. Go ahead and maximize that. From the outset, you can see some of the controls that Chaitanya was showing in Infopath. We have a text box in the top right corner. Relies on integrated security of SharePoint in the Active Directory to recognize who the user is logging into the system and welcome them. So in this case, I have logged in, so it's welcoming me. In the middle, the drop-down box tied back to that SQL budget database that shows the user what scenarios they're allowed to select and interact with. So in this case, the security is only allowing me to have access to those modules that I have access to, in which case the two scenarios I'm allowed to see are last year and this year's, or this coming year's planned budget. So this is all tied back in to an integrated security model that we referenced in the administration set. You can see we were able to add an image here, add a title, and we were able to add these action buttons that ultimately launched the child modules. Capital items module allows us to manage capital assets. The employee expenses module allows us to maintain detailed employee expense breakdowns. So this is really a per employee breakdown of the fully burdened cost to the organization, which allows them to really get granular, but at the same time maintain that idea of not just losing the forest and the trees, but keeping an eye on the forest while tending to the trees. And then the other module here is the revenue expense module, which is the full roll-up of the chart of expense accounts by department. So if we're jumping into the capital item form, we can see another Infopath form set up to allow the user to enter, edit, and interact with capital items for their department. You can see the security is still maintaining the same integration, and a label that dynamically refreshes to remind me again which scenario I'm working with. This is just another example of Infopath programmatically talking back to the SQL Server database and maintaining the active session that I've been working. You know, if you really want to get that technical piece, it's trading those data points back and forth. From the user's perspective, it's a seamless experience. I don't have to dig up another set of spreadsheets or ask somebody for their spreadsheets and figure out what's going on. I have drop-down boxes that allow me to access the departments that I am allowed to access, so we'll select Children's Mental Health Services Site 1. See the endowment use change, so this is an example of the Infopath forms interacting with the back-end database that allows me to allocate a set amount of my budget for each department. Depending on which department I use, I can keep an eye on my full budget so I know that as I'm editing or creating items, I can see their effect on the larger budget. So I can see which capital assets I plan on purchasing next year. I can see the asset classes with which they belong to, those depreciable life, and the amount that is going to cost, how that hits across the fiscal years 1 and 2. Is it in my asset management system? I can see the depreciation that I'm carrying over from the prior year. I can hit edit, and you see by clicking edit, the action tells the form to only highlight the fields that I can interact with. So if I wanted to specify which user was getting this, I could say that Chaitanya is getting this, and this is actually going to be a Tag 5 asset class. Immediately, you can see the form is interacting with the business rules, with the database, to determine that when I selected Asset Class 5, it changed the depreciable life. You can see the fiscal cost changed, as well as the endowment use total, or in this case, the full budget that I can use. If I wanted to change the amount, let's say it's only going to cost me $1,500, I can do that, and when I hit Submit, you can see that little popped up said it was working with the system, the fiscal cost changed for the years. I got this operation completed successfully. So here I was able to edit and change capital items without having to deal with a whole ream of spreadsheets, and I was able to keep an eye on my total budget use as well. I can run reports from here that allow me to show that depreciation by department. Moving on to the revenue expense form. We spoke that this module is kind of the roll-up of my full chart of expense accounts. You see, it's the same user interface, so from a training perspective, I don't have to learn a whole bunch of new modules. It's really the same familiar interface when it comes to knowing where I'm working, who I am, what I'm allowed to see, what scenarios I'm in, which department I'm in. We can go back to Children's Mental Health Services Site 1. You can see that endowment use is now carried over, so it's not as though I have to wait for a bunch of systems to work through themselves to get the new endowment use after somebody was working with capital items. I get the most recent up-to-date values. I can interact with my full chart of accounts here. I can select that same single version of the truth. I'm interacting with the same set of data. I don't have to worry about versioned spreadsheets. I don't have to worry about wondering which system I need to go to for this. All the information is at my fingertips, pre-aggregated and ready to go. So in this case, we can select, let's look at the software maintenance expenses. So what this allows me to do, I can enter my budget for next year. I can see what I budgeted the prior 2 years, as well as I can enter an estimate for what I think would hit in the current calendar year. Allows me to see variances, allow me to see the spread over the 12-month fiscal year that I have. In this case, this is a July to June. System is robust and configurable enough to really handle whatever fiscal year you might be running. As well, narratives are readily available to me in the same form and in the same set of data. So one more time, I don't have to worry about trying to monitor a little red dot on a spreadsheet that I think could either be a smudge on my screen, or this is a call out to a comment, or I don't have another set of documents that tells me about narratives that pertain to a certain account. Here we can house them in a single form in a single application. So I can hit edit again. You can see that it's highlighting the fields that I can edit. So if I wanted to change this to maybe 15,000, I could do so. And maybe instead of quarterly, I want this to be, let's go ahead and make it even distribution. So when I do that, and I click submit, sends data to the server, and you can see immediately what it's done. It refactored that budget, changed my variances, redid my distribution, and ultimately changed the endowment use available to me. This was all done affecting my business rules that I've created in the system, one-stop shopping, right? I don't have to do Excel gymnastics. I don't have to copy and paste formulas. I don't have to hope that if I make one change to this cell right here, it's going to break 7 other spreadsheets that are linked to mine. So that's an example of just how this planning and budgeting solution built across all these Infopath forms is really streamlining this process and allowing analysts to be analysts. So if we're looking at, say, the employee expense module, it allows the analyst to, again, view individual employees and see how those fully burdened costs really affect that organization's bottom line. It allows you to see that full cost broken down by category. It allows me to take employees and allocate them across multiple departments. So in the case of organizations that have multiple sites, if you're working on maybe site 1 3 days a week, site 2 2 days a week, you want to allocate that appropriately. The system allows you to do that without having to figure out a whole bunch of complex calculations or, again, manage one person across several spreadsheets. Same thing, if I have salary changes through the year, it's very easy for me to make those changes within the system and factor them back down. One of the things that also pertains to this is security. We mentioned that it's within the business users to control security and delegate security in the system, and it goes beyond just saying user can or cannot access the system. Obviously, getting into employee expenses, there's a bit of sensitivity around it. The system is smart enough to be secure to let folks know that this person can or cannot access specific modules. So again, the security is ultimately integrated back into the solution. From a workflow perspective, we've defined in our organization that when a new employee is added to the planning and budgeting system, an email should go to their manager and let them know, we've added this person to the system, you need to approve this. So I'm not just randomly adding people. So let's go ahead and add a new employee to our system. You can see, again, by clicking edit, clicking new or clicking edit, it highlights the fields that I can edit. So let's go ahead and just using my keyboard, tabbing across. I don't have to use my mouse. I can just kind of hit the arrow down key and just scroll through codes. Or if I know who I am, we'll say I'm a data analyst. Immediately affects the job code, applies the right GL code. Let's say my next review date. I can go to today, I can jump forward, and it'll be at the end of March. Say I was hired on the 20th. We'll call me a full-time employee. And let's say I'm not eligible for health insurance right now, so I don't have to fill that out. If I wanted to, I could automatically select just myself. It's because my wife has a fantastic health plan. And for dental, we'll select single as well. And you can see, as I select those, the fully burdened cost automatically is affected here. When I hit submit, the data gets sent back to my budget database. It gets stored in the system, and you can see that it ultimately affects the endowment use available to me.